Welcome to Puro Politics, the political podcast of the San Antonio Express News. My name is Gilbert Garcia, Metro columnist, and I'm joined by
Dylan McGinnis, City Hall reporter.
Business editor Greg Jefferson.
And we're very happy to be joined today by a special guest, 150th District Court Judge Monique Diaz. Thank you so much for taking time out from your busy schedule to visit us at the pod.
Thank you for having me.
Well, you've been the judge in the 150th District Court for close to 6 months. Is that about right?
Yes.
What are your impressions so far?
It's been 167 days to be exact.
You're not counting or anything.
Yeah, not at all.
The fact that you're counting, does that say anything?
No. My impressions so far, I've really, really enjoyed the job, far more than I thought that I would. It's challenging. It's exciting. Every day is completely different. Mm-hmm. I'm learning so much from all these really amazing lawyers that are coming in the courtroom every day, learning all of the different styles and techniques. My background was, I had a general law practice. I did a little bit of everything, family, divorce, is a lot of that, criminal, probate. I was a city attorney and city prosecutor for a while. So I am familiar with a little bit of everything I see on a daily basis, but I'm still surprised at how much I'm learning, how much I love it, and really how supportive my colleagues and my team have been in the transition. It's not been difficult because of this incredible support I have.
Yeah, so what kind of cases did your court handle?
Good question. It's a civil district court. So we have about 75% of our cases are family law cases, divorces, custody, child support. Then we also handle personal injury, medical malpractice, contract disputes, business disputes, title disputes, and I've yet to have an election contest, but I would have jurisdiction over that.
That'll be fun.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know all these cases are different. You talked about family law, and I know that's always been a big part of the court. And every case is different, but is there kind of a guiding principle that you kind of cling to when you look at these different cases and think, this is kind of like this is what I have to kind of always remind myself when I'm trying to adjudicate these situations?
Really, the guiding principle is the law. And, I have to be sure that I'm following the law. And everyone that comes into the courtroom and asks me to do anything, I require that they provide me the law that gives me the authority to do that and the case law that, interprets any issues. I'm surprised at how alive the law really and truly is, seeing it from this standpoint. I get cases all the time that are, what you would consider a case of first impression, meaning there's not really case law out there to help guide me and interpret it, which is part of what makes it so important to know who our judges are when we're electing them. We need folks that are going to be fair, that are going to take the time to look at the case law and the statutes and reach the best decision they possibly can.
Yeah, so what are some of the challenges you've faced? I mean, this is your first term as a judge, to move from, a working lawyer to a working judge.
Well, the biggest transition in the initial move was closing down my law firm because I was elected in November and I had a couple months to close down my law firm, and then I took office. Once I took the bench, one of the biggest challenges has been dealing with two things. One of them is in the family law context, some of the kind of touchy, difficult issues that I have to see. We see cases that involve issues of domestic violence, mental health, veterans issues, drug and alcohol abuse. So those have been really challenging to grapple with and determine what's best for the children in those cases. And then secondly, the areas of law that I didn't particularly have experience in, like personal injury. So I now know a lot more about that than I did when I first took the bench. But the lawyers have been really great in doing their jobs and briefing the court and providing me the information I need to make those decisions. So I feel comfortable now. The first 3 months, I decided I just wanted to figure out how to do my job and not screw it up. And then the next 3 months, I decided to transition into assessing how I could do my job better and where there's room for improvement, how I could work on that.
Now, I've always been really interested in your personal story. Now, your father is a Dominican and your mother Puerto Rican, and they decided to, I guess, sometime in the 80s, decided to move to San Antonio. What was it? Why did they pick San Antonio as a destination?
Well, my father served in the military for a period of time, and San Antonio is Military City, USA. So he had some friends that had visited San Antonio and had told him it was a great place to raise a family. So they took a shot and came here and they loved it, and they started off. He left the military, and they worked at Wendy's together, flipping burgers, making salads and fries. Ended up starting their own business, having a family. And I was the first in my family to graduate from college, which they're very proud of. And since then, my mother has also graduated from college with 2 degrees in art and art history, and I'm very proud of her.
And you were born in San Antonio.
I was born here, yes.
Now, ever since I've known you, I mean, you've been very involved in politics. Was this a big topic of discussion? Is this something you kind of grew up with, that politics was something that... or did you find it on your own?
Not at all. Yeah, my family is fairly apolitical, and in fact, most of my family members are Republicans. So I didn't grow up with that. It was kind of an awakening that I experienced in my older age and later high school and college. And I became civically involved, politically involved, started volunteering on a lot of campaigns on the side of my law practice, made significant investments in helping to elect and re-elect progressive candidates locally, and helping to train the next generation of progressive candidates. And so that progression kind of led up to me eventually being prepared to run for judge.
And we should mention to any listeners who don't know, you are a Democrat. And
Yes.
Do you remember the first campaign you worked on?
It was actually, yes, it was Nico LaHood's first campaign for district attorney, the one that he lost. I volunteered on the campaign, didn't know I was going to love it as much as I did. And from then it just kind of snowballed, and I continued on the side of my law practice to help several candidates and causes, ended up being the president of the Bexar County Young Democrats, brought the national convention here, raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for local candidates and causes, and I really enjoyed it.
Can I ask you, Monique? So I've been monitoring kind of loosely the rift in the Bexar County Democratic Party, and I saw you last week at the meeting, kind of presenting Monica Alcantara, the chair, with I think a gavel, right, and kind of commending her leadership in this kind of turbulence that the party has gone through. What do you make of that turbulence, and kind of how do you see how the Bexar County Democratic Party got to this point?
Yeah, I was proud to be there. They asked me to go present this gavel that the Precinct Chairs made for her. It was really beautiful, and she's worked really hard and deserved that recognition. I think you all have been reporting on local politics for a very long time here, and as long as I can remember, as many party chairs as I can remember, we've always had rifts between precinct chairs, and it's both on the Democratic side and the Republican side. We saw that very recently here locally as well. I think in the end, results are what matters. And although there are, different factions within the party, there are precinct chairs that are working really hard in all of those areas, rolling up their sleeves, making calls, knocking on doors, and getting the work done that needs to be done. And we saw the effect of that with the 2018 elections, and even with these past municipal elections where we elected our majority female council for the second time ever. So I'm still proud of the work that we're doing. I hope that we can, kind of get over some of these problems and work together, because we really need to be united if we want to continue seeing Democrats win up and down the ballot. But those are my thoughts. I'm proud of the work that we're doing now and that we've done in the past.
And it kind of gets to a question that I have, and it might be a ridiculous question, but I'm just watching all the problems that both parties have at the local level. And as you said, this is not a new thing. I mean, it's maybe gotten worse, but we've seen these kind of rifts before. And I sometimes wonder, does it even make sense to have these local party organizations? Is the positive contribution they make, does it outweigh all the problems they seem to have? And I think you'd be able to speak to that, because I mean, one thought is, you talked about precinct chairs. I would imagine in judicial races, that's where the local party organization really starts to become more important. Do you think that's true?
Absolutely. All, cliche, all politics is local, and we need organization on the ground. We need organization locally. If we had all the precinct chairs going off doing whatever they wanted to do without that organization, even if it's in several different factions, you're going to have overlap of efforts. You're going to have areas of the community that are not appropriately targeted. So you need to have that cohesive organization, a coordinated campaign, to be sure that you're knocking on all of the right doors, that you're not doubling your efforts. There's never enough money to go around to reach all of the voters that you really need to reach with your message. So absolutely, it's important for us to have those chairs and that coordination.
Yeah, in your own campaign, did you find you had to kind of work around the Democratic Party, or did you find a way to work with them? I mean,
not at all. It was very easy to work with them. And
the Civil War was still. I mean, they were having problems in the fall. I mean, this isn't new. It's just kind of exacerbated. But I mean, those problems were there, last fall. So, were there any difficulties you had in?
I would say no. Me personally, I didn't experience any difficulties. I was able to work with everyone that was involved, with the precinct chairs, with the leaders of all of the different groups. They were very supportive of our campaign, and we did whatever we could to do our part to go towards the efforts that they were making as well, to make sure that we were spending our dollars on turning out the Democratic voters that they were also trying to turn out. And so, no, I think it was very easy for me to work with them in my case.
You were running for a seat in 2018 that you had an incumbent, a Republican incumbent, Renee Yanta, and the recent history we had seen with the 2014 midterm, and I think certainly 2010, had been that these were good Republican cycles. What was it that made you decide that you were going to, taking on an incumbent and particularly a Democrat in a midterm, it would have looked like a really difficult thing to pull off? What made you decide to do that?
Well, it was right around the time, November of 2016, if you'll remember.
What happened then?
Something did happen then.
Sure
you might have to remind me.
Yeah. I'd always been really involved, and when the elections of 2016 came around, I felt pretty helpless. And I had, like many folks, a moment of reflection and introspection where I was trying to assess what I was doing with my life. And it was during that process that I decided I could be frustrated about what was happening on the national level, or I could try to do something locally. And with my skill set and experience, I thought the most appropriate thing for me to do would be to run for judge and to show our local community that we do have respect for our community, that everyone deserves to be treated fairly and equally, no matter where you come from or who you love or what religion you do or don't ascribe to. And so I wanted to make that difference here locally, and I had a feeling, I had a hunch that having this president in office was going to make that easier for us on a local level.
Which turned out to be true. So you were watching the election results in November of 2016 that night thinking.
It wasn't that night because I was in a state of shock for a couple of days, but it was very soon thereafter, yes.
Yeah.
Well, you were one of many, many, many women candidates who were kind of motivated and energized to run. Once you don't have a Trump in D.C., and I'm sure it'll happen at some point.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
He said that people might not let him leave after a second term. Did you see that?
Look, I'm ever the optimist.
Yeah.
Anyway, have women turned a corner here? Like, are you going to is this more of a permanent realignment, or is this just motivated by Trump's presidency?
I think his presidency helped. I think it helped light a fire under a lot of women who maybe weren't sure that they were ready to run, maybe weren't sure that they were qualified to run, and decided to, in light of the president that we just elected, decided to take a shot just like I did. I hope it's permanent. And based on the record-breaking numbers of women that, not just women of color, our LGBTQIA community that ran and got elected in 2018, I'm hoping that trend is just going to continue, and that our turnout trends are going to continue. I mean, we had 8.3 million folks vote in the midterm. That's almost twice as many as did the last time. So I'm hoping that in 2020 we're going to see again more records being broken, more women that are running, and that's the sense that I get. And I'm talking to leaders in our community that are asking me for advice about their potential runs coming up. And it's not just one or two, it's many. So I see that next generation of women getting ready to run if they haven't already made those announcements. And I'm really proud of that.
I know you worked really, really hard during the campaign and knocked on a lot of doors. And one of the things I was curious about is just the nature of running for a judicial seat? Because, when you're running for state representative, you're saying, well, if I'm elected, I'm going to try to pass this legislation. As you said, you're dealing with cases from day to day. You don't know what the circumstances are going to be. You're not really in a position where you're making campaign promises in a way that another candidate would be. You're really, how do you approach that? When you try to convince voters that you're the person? What's the messaging there?
There's a very delicate balance.
Yeah.
We aren't supposed to speak to issues,
Mm-hmm.
rightfully so. We could have a case in our court that would address those issues. So, some candidates you will hear kind of default to that and not answer any questions. And I found it important to have an answer to questions, whether that was an answer that provided an understanding or informed folks that I have an understanding of the issues at a minimum.
Like what kind of issues would they ask?
Everything under the sun, right? So locally, and some of the issues that we see in our courts that I mentioned earlier, domestic violence, for example. What are you going to do about domestic violence? That's an issue that I could speak to and that I have, since I've taken office, done significant work on. I made a promise to look into the issue, for example, of firearm surrender in cases of domestic violence and cases where folks have mental health issues. We're currently ordering these individuals to not possess firearms, but there's not a standardized process in place for us to force those folks to surrender the firearms thereafter, to actually retrieve them from them. So that's something that I've been working on with my colleagues. I've had some preliminary discussions with Judge Sakai, Martha Pelaez, and folks. Besides that, it's really important to educate the public about the judicial system and about why they should care about the judicial system and why they should care about who our judges are. And, you probably heard this from every single judge, but I really meant it and I still mean it. I made sure that people knew that I wanted to treat people with dignity and respect and that it doesn't matter where you come from, or anything at all, your economic circumstances, you should be treated fairly and treated equally in our courtroom. So those are the types of things that we, discuss on the campaign trail and that we continue to discuss. And I think it is a responsibility for us to continue to educate the public on in our positions as judges.
I think there's talk, every once in a while about kind of changing the system of electing judges or maybe going to, an appointed system. Do you have feelings one way or the other on whether judges should be elected?
Well, I will say I took an oath to follow and uphold our constitutions and our laws of the state of Texas and the United States. And while others may disagree with me, I don't believe that it's a judge's place to opine on that. Just like it's not the job of our executive branch to advocate that people change or that people break the laws, it's not the job of our independent judiciary to advocate the changing of the laws. The laws are what they are, and they've been like that since 1876. We've been electing our judges on a partisan basis, and the writers of our Constitution decided to do so because they thought that would be the best way to hold our judges accountable, to have direct partisan elections that allowed for regular evaluations of our performance. And so that's what they decided, and unless and until we change that, it is what it is. It's the law, and I don't feel that it's my place to comment on whether it's good or bad.
Well, there is a new law that does away with straight ticket balloting.
Correct.
So, I think it's safe to say you won your office in kind of a wave election, and you were in the right party for that particular wave. What are your concerns going forward about no longer having straight ticket balloting?
Well, that's absolutely part of what helped, get me elected. You're right. I think we're just going to have to work harder. Mm-hmm. It's already very difficult to get folks to understand why they should care about our judges. It's going to be even more difficult. We're going to have to work harder. We're probably going to have to raise more money. We're going to have to knock on more doors, make more phone calls to get that message across to people, not just about judges in general, but each judge specifically. So I think it's going to impact how we all campaign. And I think we're, as a party, really need to work on our messaging and how we're going to encourage folks to still go all the way down the ballot and not just, vote for the top few. So I think it's going to have a significant impact. It's going to take us a while to figure out how to best work around that.
And I saw you did the 1 minute video you did where you kind of broke down the state's judicial system in 1 minute, which was really good. And I wonder if you kind of you see it as part of your role to let people know, because I mean, one of the things that we talk about at the paper and have talked about for a long time is the frustration that we feel with the fact that people just often don't know that much about the judicial system and the candidates, and it's really hard because I mean these are such important offices that people sometimes don't know enough about.
Absolutely. I mean, technically our what we absolutely have to do as judges is go to court and rule on cases, right? Mm-hmm. But I see our job description as being much broader than that. I think it is our responsibility to go out into the community and educate folks about why they should care about our judges and how our judicial system works on a basic level. For example, I ran for the 150th District Court, and I had every other person ask me, where is that district? Well, it's actually not a geographic district. It's the entire county of Bexar. It was named in the order that it was created. Mm-hmm. Simple things like that, educating folks on that, I think is very important. I also think it's important for us to go out in the community and be role models to the next generation of our leaders. I spend a lot of time going to schools, elementary, middle, high school, talking to folks about how I got to where I am, why the judicial system is important, why they'll be honored to serve jury duty one day, and kind of how that system works.
That's a tough sell. I would imagine that's a tough one. Yeah.
So I do find that to be part of my responsibilities.
I was curious about you're as we mentioned earlier, you've been involved in politics for a long time. Being a judge now, how do you approach it? We've got two Texans on the Democratic side running for president now. There's a lot going on in Texas Democratic politics. Do you still feel that you can kind of play the same role that you have in the past, or are you a little more cautious about it as a judge now?
Well, absolutely. The rules are very different from my behavior is completely changed from when I started running, and before that when I was very actively involved in Democratic politics. As a judge and even as a judicial candidate, we are forbidden from endorsing other candidates per the judicial canons. So I obviously can't, speak out in support or against anyone, but I can encourage folks to be involved in the political process. So what I have done for the past municipal elections, for example, is use my platforms that I have to make sure people have access to the links they need to register to vote, so they know where to go vote, when to vote. So I can be involved in that capacity. That's pretty much the most that I can do. But I am very excited about having two Texans on the ballot. I think that's going to be a game changer. And us having, I believe, our first presidential candidate from San Antonio and HUD Secretary Julian Castro. So I think that's going to be great for turnout in Texas and here in San Antonio, and hopefully will bode well for us in the upcoming elections as well.
It's also our first Super Tuesday, right?
Yes. That's right. Yeah, we're going to be going to be a big player, I think, 2020. So, well, I think on that note, we're gonna wrap it up. Judge Monique Diaz, thank you so much for joining us. It was great having you on. And for those of you listening, thank you so much, and we'll catch up with you next week. Take care.